I thought routine was safety. Every receipt, every text, every reminder a shield against chaos. But when a detective knocked at my door, I discovered the schedule I lived by wasn't mine at all. It was his. My life had been built into a perfect alibi, and I was trapped inside it. I was not married to a good man. I was married to a calendar. Every morning at 6:30 I ground beans in the small steel grinder until the kitchen hummed like a hive. At 6:50 I locked the door twice and walked down the same block where Mrs. Vale watered her plants with a hose that leaked at the nozzle. At 7:12 a text would arrive. Always the same words. Made it home. My thumb would brush the screen and answer yes even though he already knew. By 8 I was on the rear seat of the bus pressed against the cold window where the city passed like a film I had memorized. For 10 years I thought routine kept me safe. I believed order worked like armor. Nothing unexpected could reach me if I lived inside a pattern with no loose edges. I cooked chili every Thursday. I bought groceries with a list written in my tight, careful hand. I kept every receipt folded into an envelope marked by month. I set reminders on the smart home app to dim the lights and lock the door. Evan said it made life smoother. I thought it was his kindness. The apartment walls were narrow and the furniture lined up like soldiers. On the kitchen wall hung a calendar filled with neat boxes and inked marks. Birthdays, bill due dates, dentist appointments, small things, no gaps, no accidents. He told me life was simpler when you followed the plan. I agreed. I thought love could look like reliability. Sometimes when I described him to friends, I said Evan was steady. He never forgot a task. He never missed a call. He checked in on time like clockwork. They laughed that I was lucky. I laughed too. I believed them. The first crack appeared on an ordinary evening when the knock at the door came at 7:30 sharp. The sound startled me because nothing ever interrupted that hour. The chili simmered. The calendar said groceries were done. The text from Evan had already arrived at 7:12. I opened the door and saw Detective Rhee. She looked calm, as if she had been waiting for me to open my life like another neat envelope. She said she was asking neighbors about a break-in across town. Nothing to do with me, just routine. Except she added one thing. The burglary happened last night at 7:12. I was texting from home then. CCTV had caught the building entrance. So of course it could not have been me. That should have ended the conversation. Yet the way her eyes lingered on me suggested the routine itself had drawn her here. I closed the door after she left, but I felt the air tilt. My safe walls suddenly seemed thin. The grinder sat silent on the counter. The calendar squares stared back like a net I had been tangled in for a decade. I told myself not to worry. Routines are proof. Proof is safety. Still, when I touched my phone, I noticed a small blinking icon I had never cared about before. The word read scheduled. I had never pressed it. I had never needed to. Yet it glowed like a small secret in my own hand. The next morning I woke before the alarm. I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in my palm. The word scheduled still blinked in the corner like a signal only I had ignored. At 7:12 sharp, the usual message sent itself. Made it home. My thumb never touched the screen. I stared at the log. It said sent by automation. I had not known my phone could do that. I remembered one winter night when Evan leaned over me on the couch with his warm smile and told me he would set up shortcuts to make life easier. He said I should not waste energy tapping the same things every day. He pressed a few icons with quick fingers while I watched. He called it love in action. I thought he was helping me stay organized. Later that afternoon, Detective Rhee asked to meet me again. She carried a small notebook but barely wrote anything. Instead, she slid my phone across the table and pointed to the record. The 7:12 text from last night had been scheduled days in advance. She asked if I had known. I told her no. Her gaze was steady, kind but unyielding. She said sometimes people use order as a fence. She let the word hang. Fence. As if someone had built a perimeter around me. When she left, I opened the smart home app. I had never looked at its settings. I found dozens of repeating automations. Messages sent every evening. Lights dimmed at the same times. Groceries ordered with the same list. Even receipts linked to dates that matched news articles about robberies and fires in the city. My own paper trail worked like a clockwork puppet show, proving I was always home. I remembered how Evan had insisted I scan every receipt. He said it was for budgeting. I remembered how he asked me to text when I sat on the bus. He said it calmed him. I remembered how he made me keep location services always on. He said it was for safety. I thought it was care. That night I could not eat the chili. The smell felt wrong. The routine itself felt like a trap. I looked at the calendar on the wall and saw not squares but cages. My life had been built into an alibi machine. Every gesture I made was a record. Every text a defense. For him, not for me. The next day Detective Rhee came again. She did not accuse. She suggested. She said someone close to me might have turned my habits into evidence of presence. She said it softly as though she knew the weight of each word. I felt my chest tighten. She asked if I wanted to help her test the pattern. She said I did not have to change everything. Just one link. See who noticed. I thought of the sacred text at 7:12. The one piece of routine I had never once broken. My finger hovered over the screen. I felt sweat gather on my palm. To delay it by even a minute felt like tearing open the armor I had worn for 10 years. But I nodded. I agreed. That night at 7:12 I did not send the reply. I waited until 7:14. I thought silence would pass unnoticed. Within seconds the phone rang. Evan's voice came warm but tight. He asked if everything was okay. He said he had just happened to be nearby and could stop by with dessert. His words were too quick. Too ready. My blood turned cold, though his tone sounded gentle. I realized the fence had teeth. And he was standing on the inside with me. I let him in that night. He carried a white paper bag with 2 small cakes inside. He set them on the counter as though nothing had shifted. His smile was gentle. His voice calm. Yet my skin prickled. He sat across from me and asked about my day. He asked whether the bus had been crowded. He asked whether Mrs. Vale had been watering again. He asked all the little details he already knew. I forced myself to play along. I told him it was fine. I told him Mrs. Vale was still talking about her nephew. I told him the bus was full. My voice shook, though I tried to sound steady. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. He said that was why the automations mattered. So I would never be caught off guard. He said the world was dangerous. He said people could misunderstand. His words slid like oil. The next morning I called Detective Rhee. She asked if I could keep him talking. She said the routine itself was evidence, but evidence needed cracks. She asked if I could let him show his hand. I said yes. I wanted to believe I could do it. That evening she wired me with a small device no bigger than a button. She told me to act natural. I thought about that word. Natural. Nothing about my life felt natural anymore. It felt scripted. Like a play written by someone else with me as the stage prop. At dinner I brought it up. I asked Evan if we could turn off the automations. I said maybe we did not need them anymore. I said maybe I wanted more freedom. He set his fork down. He smiled in that slow way he had. He said, but they protect you. I asked from what? My voice cracked. His face shifted just slightly. A shadow passed across it. He said from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. His voice was soft. Too soft. I heard something final in it. That night, when he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling. The glow from the clock marked each passing minute. I thought about the calendar on the wall. The notes. The receipts. The messages. They were not memories of a life. They were props of an alibi. My face was on every one of them. My name was on every record. He had not built a double life. He had built a single provable one. For me. So he could vanish into nights free of suspicion. I thought of all the times he said he loved my reliability. All the times he said I was the one person he could count on. I had believed those words. Now I heard them as commands. I woke before him. I walked into the kitchen. I touched the grinder but did not turn it on. I stared at the phone. I knew what I had to do. I had to break the pattern completely. No small delays. No partial gaps. I had to vanish from the map he had built for me. I turned off location. I left my phone on the table. I walked out into the night without the signal he relied on. Each step felt like breaking glass underfoot. For the first time in 10 years I was invisible. And it terrified me. The city looked different without the shield of my schedule. The air felt sharp. Every light seemed brighter. I walked past the bus stop where I always sat in the rear seat. I kept walking until I reached another line I had never taken. I dropped coins into the machine and boarded. I sat in the front this time. I watched the streets unfold in angles I had never seen. No receipt would log this trip. No app would record it. I was a ghost in my own life. At 7:12, the phone I had left behind must have lit up with another scheduled text. Made it home. The words would appear without me. Evan would expect the answer. Instead, he would find silence. The silence was mine. I got off near an alley where Detective Rhee had asked me to meet her. She stood in the shadow. She gave me a nod. She told me to wait. My hands trembled. I kept hearing his voice saying the automations protect you. I wondered whether he was already looking. A few minutes later, a different phone buzzed in my pocket. A number I did not know. The message was his voice in text. "Where are you?" I stared at it until my chest burned. Then I saw him. Evan turned the corner into the alley. His breath was fast as though he had run. His hand clutched a second phone. His eyes locked on me with a mixture of relief and anger. He said I was not where I was supposed to be. Detective Rhee stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. She simply told him to stop. He looked only at me. He spoke as if she were air. He said he could fix it. He said all I had to do was keep the routine. His tone was gentle, almost pleading, but his words were a cage. I answered with the calm I did not feel. I said I was done being his alibi. For the first time, I did not sound like part of his script. I sounded like myself. Rhee moved then. She placed him under arrest. He did not struggle. He did not shout. He simply looked at me as if I had betrayed the one rule of his world. He was led away and the alley fell silent. I stood there shaking. The fence around me had cracked open, but the emptiness beyond it felt vast. My armor was gone. I did not know what would replace it. Later at home, I made coffee at a new time. The grinder sounded strange at 8 instead of 6:30. On the bus, I sat in the front again. The streets looked new. My phone buzzed at 7:12 with one last scheduled message. Made it home. I let it glow unanswered until it died. Then I deleted the automation. I opened the recorder and spoke into the silence. From now on I choose when things happen. I thought it was over. But on the stairs that evening Mrs. Vale greeted me. She said she would miss hearing the little chime at 7:12. She smiled wistfully. My eyes drifted to her wrist. She wore a fitness band syncing to the building Wi-Fi. The network name on its display was Evan Guest. The world tilted again. And I understood the fence might not have only one builder. I froze on the landing. Mrs. Vale smiled as though nothing had slipped. Her eyes carried that chatty warmth I had known for years. Yet the band on her wrist betrayed something colder. Evan Guest. I tried to steady my voice. I asked how long she had worn it. She laughed and said her neighbor was so generous. He had set it up for her when her old pedometer broke. He had told her it would keep her connected. I nodded. I forced a smile. I let her talk about her nephew again. I let her talk about the weather. I watched her mouth move, but my mind was elsewhere. I saw the puzzle expanding. I had thought the fence was mine alone. But I was not the only one trapped. Back inside the apartment, I sat at the table and spread the receipts across the wood. Each one marked by date and time. I began circling them. I saw nights when sirens had passed outside. Nights when news had broken about another robbery or fire. Each time I had proof of presence. Not just me. Sometimes Mrs. Vale too. She often mentioned where she had been. She liked to say Evan had reminded her to keep track. The more I traced the pattern, the clearer it became. He had built a network of routine. Not just my life. Not just my habits. But hers. And perhaps others too. Neighbors who thought they were being cared for. Friends who thought they were being kept safe. Each life folded into his calendar. Each voice turned into a scheduled note. Detective Rhee called that night. She asked how I was. I told her about the band. Her silence on the other end lasted long enough for me to feel the weight. She said softly that control often spreads like roots underground. She said once one fence is built, the builder rarely stops at a single yard. I could not sleep. I lay awake with the glow of the clock on the ceiling. I kept hearing Evan's words. Just keep the routine. I thought about how many people believed those words. How many people lived inside boxes marked by his ink. The next morning I broke everything. I turned off the app. I pulled the calendar from the wall and tore it. I walked out without grinding the coffee, without locking the door twice, without scanning a receipt. I sat on no bus. I let the silence grow. My phone lit up with dozens of alerts, scheduled texts, automated reminders, calls from numbers I did not know but that all carried his tone. The system he built still pulsed even with him gone. My absence was the one variable it could not contain. By evening I felt the tension in the walls. Mrs. Vale knocked gently and asked if I was all right. She said she had noticed the silence. She said she had grown used to the rhythm. She sounded almost lonely. Her eyes drifted again to the band on her wrist. I saw the faint blue glow as it synced. I realized then that taking Evan away had not dismantled the structure. It only cut off its head. The body still twitched. The habits still ran. The fence still stood. And I was still inside it. The next day I went to see Detective Rhee in her office. She listened without interrupting while I described the receipts, the patterns, the wristband, the way the system kept pulsing without its keeper. She leaned back and tapped her pen against the table. She said it was never just about him. It was about how people give away their time in exchange for safety. She said most never notice when safety turns into a leash. I left her with that thought and walked home through streets I had never bothered to take. Each step without a schedule felt like walking on unfamiliar ground. It should have been freedom, yet freedom carried its own weight. Without the framework I felt both light and unmoored. Every clock I passed seemed to ask where I should be. I refused to answer. At home I sat at the table again. I pulled the last envelope of receipts from the drawer. I held them in my hands and thought of how Evan had built his story with my life as evidence. The neat envelopes were supposed to prove my reliability. Now they proved only how deeply I had been used. I fed them into a small flame one by one and watched the ink curl into ash. The phone buzzed again at 7:12. One final scheduled message I had missed. Made it home. I let it glow across the room without touching it. The words looked pitiful now, like a puppet speaking without a master. I deleted it. I opened the voice recorder and spoke. From now on I choose when things happen. My voice sounded thin at first but grew steadier with each word. Later that night I heard Mrs. Vale on the stairs. She stopped me with a smile. She said she would miss the little chime at 7:12. She said it had given her comfort to know someone else was living by the same beat. Her tone was wistful but her eyes carried something else. They drifted again to the fitness band glowing faint blue on her wrist. It pulsed as it synced to the building network. The name on the connection read Evan Guest. I walked past her without speaking. I felt the air thicken like it had that first night when the knock came. I knew the fence was larger than I had imagined. Evan was gone but the rhythm still breathed in others. Perhaps in many others. The cage had more than one keeper. I climbed the stairs and closed the door behind me. I sat in the dark with the phone silent at last. I understood then that escape would not come from breaking one routine. It would come from never letting another person write my schedule again. The system could outlive its maker, but I could outlive the system. That was the choice, and I had already made it.